This is Dead Serious, a show about short horror stories worthy of discussion. I'm Dead Palette, and better late than never. Today we're going to be taking a look at Fleming Unit number 118, Perturbed Playwright by strangecoffee. Let's get right into this one and see what it has on offer. When I drove past the Fleming Plaza and into the driveway to the storage unit facility, I was still griping about having to haul my stuff out of here. It was late enough, and I had very long shifts at work. I parked in the parking lot of that odd bar that closed down a couple of years ago, and stepped out, and then it says weather in all caps and brackets, so I think that that's meant to be a placeholder that wasn't edited to be the actual line. Night air and shivered. I hadn't even bought a coat. The factory where I work is so hot, I never bring one while I'm at work, but I wish I had now. I went to work without a coat, and now I wish I hadn't. I walked up to the police officer next to the gate and showed them my paperwork and key. He let me in and told me that they were closing in 30 minutes, so I should make it quick. There weren't many other people there, and the ones that were sped up walking back and forth, some police officers helping them. I quickly walked over to the unit near the back and slid the key into the lock, ready for the night to be over. So we have a rather large opening paragraph. Some of it is kind of fluff information, but we do get some interesting stuff. You know, there's the mention of the bar that closed down and the aspect of the coat not being brought because of his job, or their job, I don't know gender. So that's pretty cool. When I opened up the unit, it was filled with what I expected, junk. It was mostly empty, with a couple of dusty storage totes full of old memories in a file cabinet. I noticed the baseball bat in one of those totes and wondered how random this stuff really was. The room smelled strange, like an old library, and the scent contrasted harshly with the cold air outside. I looked at the file cabinet in the back corner of the room and tried to remember what I had put there. I figured I would just find out what it was in it later, and started to pick up some of the boxes to move out to my car. It took me a while, and a police officer had to help me with the file cabinet, but I left before they closed. It was still a pretty long drive until I got home, so I called my wife to let her know. So far, this is very paint by numbers, and that's not a bad thing. This is just a person describing their experience with the storage units. And if nothing particularly traumatic is happening right off the bat, you would expect it to just be a blog of just someone talking about their day. And that's what we're getting so far. Nothing too much to criticize or praise, really. Just, going through the motions. Hey Liz, I had to go pick up that junk that was in the storage unit, so I'll be late home. Would you mind making dinner tonight? Sure, hon. I totally forgot about that old thing. What was in there? Oh, it's just some old file cabinets and papers, nothing much. All right, does spaghetti sound good? Yep, I'll be home in about an hour. See you then. Again, same commentary, very much so standard day-to-day kind of thing. Man calling home to his wife. I guess it could be lesbians. I'm going to imagine that it's lesbians. The spaghetti was great. I'd only been married to Elizabeth for a year then, and I was loving every second of it. We would walk around the nearby park, which was where we first met, and take our dog Skip with us. She was a great cook. She could make about anything we wanted. She was vibrant and creative, and always wanted to move out of Montana one day to a big city like LA, but I managed to talk her out of it for some time. I really liked this small town and wanted to stay a little bit longer before moving. And Liz was the kind of person to listen to you and your ideas. We were both relatively young, just over 30, and were glad to have each other for our adventure through life. Aww. Is Liz going to end up murdered? Is that what's happening? I did find out what was in the storage unit the day after. In the storage unit totes were old china sets, picture frames with no pictures, and lamp that had never been used. The first 3 drawers of the storage cabinets were also boring, just old certificates and forms that we didn't have room for, but we would need eventually. The last drawer was very interesting. About 1 or 2 years before Liz and I had gotten married, I was perusing my dream career of a playwright. I volunteered at a local theater to write some scripts for them. None of them were really that good, and I wasn't getting paid at all, but it was the happiest time of my life. But the way you're describing your wife in this story, the narrator is describing their wife, I would say that they're having the happiest time of their life now, but who knows. But then some medical expenses came up, and I decided to put my playwright days behind me and go full-time at work. I'm still very happy with my programming job that actually makes me some money, but I've always wished I could get back into my old hobby. So that night, I looked through some of them. Very relatable. A lot of people give up on what they consider their dreams to make some sort of compromise. You know, it's a materialistic world and you gotta make that money, right? Especially if you're dealing with overwhelming medical expenses or student debt or any other type of crippling anxiety-causing debt. So this is very much so a story of real life. I started with the oldest ones. The paper was ancient and I was afraid I would break it. The oldest one was pretty terrible, either soppy, cheesy romance or repetitive adventure stories. I almost stopped reading them out of embarrassment for my younger self, but decided to skip to the most recent ones, hoping that they would have improved a little from some of my firsts. Very relatable. Who's going to write a good story is going to write a bad story that they cringe at. And they were a lot better, telling more detailed stories with more original storylines than Knights and Dragons. One of them stood out in particular, though. It was the last one I'd written. I knew I had to find a real job. It was about a failing marriage, something I feared at the time when I wrote it. Having married so quickly and having divorced parents. The fights were dramatic, and there was a lot of plotting behind each other's backs about leaving each other. The big twist of the play is that the wife starts to go off her rocker and decides to try to kill the husband, then frame him and say that the killing was self-defense. This is supposed to make the audience feel sympathy for the husband, and when the wife's plan fails, he looks like a knight who has overcome his dragon. Looking back, it was probably the best one in the pile, but it still had its problems. I looked at the script one last time before putting it back into the filing cabinet and changed my mind. I took the script over to my desk and pinned it on my corkboard along with a couple other scripts. I then turned off the lights and went to bed. Alright, so I think that this paragraph is a little bit too big, kind of could be sliced up into 2 paragraphs, maybe 3 small ones, and it would be easier to read. But the crux of this is pretty realistic. It's talking about someone going from high fantasy and kind of very generic trappings of that to doing what I think writers should do and pulling from their real life experiences. And this person has a fear of divorce because of their parents. I think that a lot of people fear getting into a marriage now, and we have declining marriage rates because they so often end in messy divorces that end up hurting children. It becomes a sordid affair, And so the idea of transitioning from high fantasy to, even likening the high fantasy aspects to this more realistic story is great. Especially, the aspect of, fearing reading your old material. This is all really interesting. And I think where it's leading is that the story becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's my prediction. The next day blended into many of the previous ones. Lots of long, boring, and exhausting hours at the factory, but a nice time at home. It was dark when I got home, and Liz had put on a fire. She said, "Hey Mark, how was work?" I paused for a moment before answering. "Oh, hi Mark." It was the usual, but not a lot of traffic. I paused because I was having a bit of deja vu, and I swear this same interaction happened before, but I couldn't figure it out. So when he's saying that he's having deja vu, I'm wondering if maybe this is a scene that played out in the script that Mark wrote. Mark, of course, being a common unisex name. Still going with my lesbian theory. Mark? "Oh yeah, work was fine, hun. You know how it is," I said as I poured some wine into a glass. We talked about things for a little while, about work and how unfair our bosses were and how uncooperative our co-workers were. After some more crackers and wine, I went over to my desk to drink a little, answer a few lingering emails, and browsing Reddit. Should be browse Reddit. At some point, I looked at some of my play scripts again. That's when I realized what happened earlier with the deja vu. It was similar to the scene in my play where the husband comes home and there's a fire on and the wife says hello to him. In the script, she rolls her eyes and takes a sip of her wine after saying it. I had to stay the thought of it. I wonder whether Liz did that or not, but then instantly disregarded it. So this paragraph is about halfway over. I feel that that's an ending spot, right there, before we go into the next paragraph. That's the end of the thought, and the way that you structure your paragraphs does matter, because this is it just chunks it out in proper swallowable bites, She would never do something like that. I knew she wouldn't. I got up and decided to go spend some more time with her. It sounds a little silly now, but I'm a bit of a paranoid guy and wanted to reinforce the good ideas in my brain. No, I completely understand what that means. I think that that's a very relatable thing. You see a piece of fiction where someone is betrayed or, someone doesn't treat someone right, and then it kind of gives you this moment of not necessarily paranoia, but kind of like appreciation for what it is you have, and really puts things in perspective for you. I think that that's a pretty natural thing. So I took the dog's leash off the coat hanger, got Skip out of the backyard, and invited Liz to go on a walk with me. It's kind of weird that we didn't introduce Skip the dog, but okay. She said that it was going to be dark outside, but she agreed. When we hadn't been on a night's walk for a while, and sometimes we could see bats and stray cats. It was probably too cold now to see night creatures, but Skip still needed a walk. So we walked over to Patterson Park. While we were walking over there, Liz wasn't talking much. Could be anything. She's probably just tired, cold, or doesn't want to go outside right now, I thought to myself. But there was still a lingering thought in my mind. Yeah, paragraphs are kind of bothering me because that's a lot of information, but I do like the beat by beat. I would say that, we're getting near the end of the story, and I'm feeling like there hasn't been enough misdirection from the core story, because I'm kind of predicting these things before they're happening and giving a little more room for your mind to wander and get off the core of what's happening makes it less predictable. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I do presume that there's going to be an attempted murder, but I don't know the exact details. I do like that it's wrapping up with a nice poetic bow of they're going to the park where they always walked and where they met and that kind of thing. That's neat. This went on for a couple of days, us being separated for half the day, and the other half was me trying to test my wife's feelings. I really should have just asked her, but at the time, I thought that that would have made the situation worse. This went on for longer than I wanted to admit, and looking back, on the script now. I can see it's been highlighted and covered in red pen. I don't want to read what I wrote all over it. I kept telling myself that this has gone too far and that I'm just freaking out, but I had to be positive. I had to positive. Should be I had to be positive. My life just kept lining up with the script. I actively read ahead and tried to avoid certain scenes and dialogue, but as soon as they came up again, I felt certain I would meet my doom at the hands of my troubled wife. But then it could all just be coincidence. Most of the things that have happened are everyday things. Baked potatoes for dinner, but Liz brought up the future. That same thing has happened. And another time when I was driving home, I got a call from Liz about the groceries. The third one this week. This is all kind of like, we're ramping up the story, and it feels like our author kind of got bored with the story and is just trying to rush it along, rather than spacing out these examples to give them more weight. And you shouldn't do that. If you're getting fatigued with a story, you should really, step away from it and let the story breathe, let your mind wander and figure out how you want to resolve it. And I feel that maybe we needed a little more patience here at the end, because I'm really invested in this, and now it seems that we're kind of, shortchanging the build-up. I know she's been really busy, but what if she really just doesn't want to see me? The script says that the wife makes her partner go on errands all the time because she hates him. I have to be certain, but there is no way I can be. Again, this is very much so playing into the kind of mindset that a lot of people have, where there's a breakdown in communication that doesn't need to be there, due to paranoia, due to self-consciousness, due to fear of loss, these kinds of things, inducing, a situation that doesn't need to be there. And I really like that. I've shredded the script now, but I put the filing cabinet on the side of the road. I've done everything I can to erase my playwright past from my mind. I'm trying to forget about it. I think my wife might have caught on, and now my time is limited. I must come to a decision, tell her everything and look insane, or stay alert and wait until she confronts me about it, in whatever form that might take. I don't know what to do. I feel trapped. I have to do something either way. I really like this story because it is talking about something that actually happens. People getting neurotic. Look, if someone actually loves you, especially enough to marry you in this day and age when marriage is such a risky proposition, then you should be honest with them. And I think that that's what this story is getting at. It could be everything and it could be nothing. It could be that this playwright, that the script from the past is somehow predicting the future, but I think that it's more likely that there's nothing supernatural going on here. And I think that the reader is meant to conclude the same thing. And, at the beginning of this file, and it seems like this is a work in progress file more than anything, we have some notes, and these notes are things that was suggested in the project itself. One of those is, doesn't need to be too scary or too scared. Don't copy Psychosis too much. Play it back and listen again. So this person was inspired by Psychosis. I can definitely see that. And it does play in to the paranoia that I think is pretty common nowadays. A lot of people are dealing with this kind of social anxiety, even with people who they're very close to. So, overall criticisms of this is just the literal structure of it. The paragraphs need to be spaced out more, a little bit more breathing room, and extend the ending a little bit. And we really do have a really solid core, very much so, copying, quote unquote, copying Psychosis. That's good. It's good to have that kind of inspiration, because even though this is following that skeleton of Psychosis, it's very much so its own thing. Instead of being paranoid that everyone else on Earth is dead, the paranoia is a lot more personable, a lot more personal, period, that it's hyperfixated on this man and their wife. And that's great. If you enjoyed this criticism, then you will definitely enjoy the more lighthearted Fear Fiction podcast, where myself, Abysme, and Slime Beast read and critique short horror stories from all around the internet, from the Creepypasta Wikia to fanfiction.net to Archive of Our Own and the SCP stories, RCP, just no sleep, let's not meet, all of it. And we also read other Fleming Storage Unit stories as well. With all of that out of the way, let's get on to our sponsor of the day, which is Lesbian Seagulls. Lesbian Seagulls. So majestic.